Welcome to Ancient Geeks, a podcast where two geeks of a certain age voyage back in time to our younger selves and talk about how we discovered all things geeky before they became a big part of mainstream popular culture. We were geeks before it was chic. I'm Tom Grant, and I'm feeling good about this episode, Stephen.
And I'm your co-host, Stephen Taylor, and I'm prepared to open the pod bay doors, Tom.
All right. Well, we're talking about 2001, if that weren't blazingly obvious from that introduction. But before we get into 2001, A Space Odyssey, what geeky things have you been doing lately?
So there's been quite a bit of preparing for future episodes, but I'm testing a kind of a theory about comic books and reading stuff that I just is out in the back catalog. And
Hmm.
instead of trying to figure out a proper entry point, I'm just sort of diving into some stuff and seeing how I react to it. So I started reading 2008's Iron Man run by Matt Fraction, which is not bad. I have some thoughts that I may share on the Substack at some point, but I know I've been making promises about that I haven't fulfilled. So we'll just,
Hmm.
maybe we'll see. But it's, an interesting foray. How about yourself?
Well, before we leave that, I mean, was the Supergirl run part of that?
Iron Man, not Superman.
No,
Iron
I'm saying,
Man.
but as part of, kind of
Oh,
what
my
you
diving in?
did
I
diving
did.
in, yeah.
I did read a couple of, and I thought I'd said on the
Since
podcast.
Supergirl is in the air right now.
I did read a Supergirl Woman of Tomorrow, which I thought
Yeah.
was quite good, and I can see how it would make the basis of a film. The art was quite good.
Okay. So I've been on book safaris. So I've been venturing out from my base camp here at home to go to used bookstores and track down used books and bring them back alive. And I wrote a little bit about that a couple of times on the Substack, and it's been great. I read my first book from that. I'm gonna do a review of it, and anyway, I continue to do that. I find some interesting books. I puzzle over whether I want to get a particular copy of something because it might not be in the best of shape, or it might be a little too expensive because some bookstore owners are savvy about what are highly valuable tomes. And anyway, it's been a kind of a fun little adventure, and I
Excellent.
enjoy the experience of reading physical books quite a lot.
I do wish I had a used bookstore nearby. I do not anymore.
Well, that's a shame.
It's too bad.
So how close would the closest one?
The nearest really decent used bookstore that I'm aware of is in Birmingham, which is almost an hour and a half, 2 hours from where I live.
Oh, that's a lot. Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, because here it's just like 10, 15 minutes to
No,
some.
there
Yeah.
was one. We had one in Montgomery for a very long time that closed down, and I did find some books, as I mentioned on the podcast a month or so ago, at a flea market, but
Hmm.
used bookstore, not so much.
Okay.
I don't know
Well,
how you make money as a used bookstore owner, to be honest, but that's probably why there aren't that many of them.
well, they're all criminal fronts.
Well,
That's how you do it. Or you overcharge spectacularly.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Or you
That
sell something
they
else.
don't. They don't. They don't. Um, not under the table. Anyway, so we're really just like I casting aspersions on used bookstore owners right and left here.
Well, I mean, I did one of the comic shops I used to go to. I know he did sell weed out the back of the store, but that I didn't was not a partaker. But this was the rumor at least. So there you
Ah,
go.
okay.
I won't say who or where or how, but that's just there you go.
But you know who you are.
That's right.
You know what you
I'm
did, young man.
sure they're listening.
Well, every episode we always pick a soundtrack selection that we cannot afford given our complete absence of a budget for doing this podcast, but we wish we could. So what would you choose for this episode?
I realized, and I meant to look. We probably could afford this because it probably is in the public domain somewhere. But also Sprock Zarathustra has to be for me. That's the music for this movie.
Yes,
So I
it's
have to,
the
I have
it's the
to go with
signature music.
it's just, yeah.
Yeah, I chose something a little different when I was watching it. I was really struck by the use of the music when we first see the Discovery
Hmm.
on its way to Jupiter, and that turns out to be from the composer Khachaturian. It's called Guyana's Adagio.
Okay. I was
I was not
unaware.
actually aware. I was not aware of that either. Years and years and years I've I've known about this movie in some depth, and I didn't know that was that particular piece of music. Okay, so we're going to get into 2001, A Space Odyssey from the 1960s, the Stanley Kubrick classic. We'll talk a little bit about our own experiences with this movie and kind of related elements of it. When did you first see this movie?
So I'm not sure exactly when I first saw it, but I had to have been sometime in high school on video cassettes. I probably rented it. I was aware of it before that. Maybe I saw it on TV at some point, but I did not see it in the theater for sure.
Okay. I saw it at a drive-in,
So how old were you at the time?
six.
Okay.
And so my family went to go see 2001. I kind of remember the space scenes to some extent, but I think
Hmm.
what made the biggest impression on me was the end sequence.
Okay.
Anyway, and I don't remember talking about the movie. Again, I was 6 years old. I don't remember what the adults were saying about the movie, but that was my experience.
Do you remember the first time you saw it when you would have been old enough to really comprehend it?
Yes, I saw it when I was in my teens. I was in high
Okay.
school.
Yeah.
And I did see it again then
In a theater
uh,
or in
at
some
a
other
theater.
format?
It was probably the Balboa Theater in Newport Beach,
Okay.
but I remember seeing it on the screen in my teens.
Okay.
All right, so this is a movie that's a collaboration to between Stanley Kubrick, the director,
Hmm.
and Arthur C. Clarke, and Arthur C. Clarke, of course, is a major figure in classic science fiction. How did you see him when you were younger as an author?
So, I mean, Clark was, in my mind at the time, one of the sort of major science fiction authors, especially of hard science fiction at the
Hmm.
time. He was in this general pantheon in my head with Asimov and Bradbury, maybe Heinlein, some of these people that sort of were like the people.
Right.
Although I didn't read as much Clark as I did Asimov or even Heinlein or Niven or whatnot. I know I read Rendezvous with Rama. I know I read the 2010 novel that he wrote that became the movie. I think I
Hmm.
read the novel for 2001 at some point. I wanted to read Childhood's End. I can't remember if I did or not. I remember, we've mentioned before that Barlow's Guide of Extraterrestrials. There's an alien there from Childhood's End that always sort of fascinated
Yes.
me. But that was back in the day where you were hunting for books and used bookstores. Speaking of top of the show, and couldn't always find what I was looking for necessarily. I can't remember what else that I read. He was not my favorite. But I saw him as important. How about yourself?
Yeah, he occupied an interesting space in science fiction when I became a real reader. He was certainly one of those people you had to read,
Yeah.
and if you didn't, you would be cast into the outer darkness, and no one would ever speak to you again from the science fiction community. Uh, I remember reading Childhood's End was the first of his works that I encountered, and I really enjoyed it. I did read some of the other books that he did.
Hmm.
Rendezvous with Rama, The Fountains of Paradise came out when I was in my teens again, and I remember enjoying them to some extent, but in the same fashion as you, I was not a huge fan.
Just so little of it stuck with me for whatever reason. I
Yeah.
remember, and we'll end up talking about this more in a couple of weeks, but we've mentioned Hour 25 before, which was a science fiction radio show that was on in the LA market, well, in California, and
Hmm.
they spoke of him very lovingly. I
Oh,
remember.
reverently. Yeah.
And I think, in fact, that may be what made me read Rendezvous with Rama. That there was somebody who was really, I don't know who it was, whether it was the host or a guest, just carrying on about this book. And so maybe part of it was I had expectations that weren't met, but they just, again, they didn't stick with me.
Yeah.
And
Now
and
I
and,
have
and
to
I
say, so
no,
so
go
I have
ahead.
to say that I didn't love his novels as much, except for Childhood's End, as much as I did his short stories. Like I remember one of the things that was, I think, pivotal in my understanding of him as a writer was the short story collection, The 9 Billion Names of God.
Hmm.
And the title story was really good. And there were other stories in the collection. I think The Sentinel, which we'll talk about, was also in that. But
Right, right.
anyway, it was a good short story collection. I think he worked better in that medium than he did as a novel writer.
And I don't know that I'm sure I've read some short stories, but I couldn't name one that I know that I read. And
Yeah.
I did not have that collection.
He was
So,
also a bit of a distant figure in
yes,
science fiction. I mean, he was physically distant. At some point, he moved to Sri Lanka.
right.
I don't think you can get much more distant, at least from the American science fiction community. So, like, he wasn't a person who showed up to conventions, or he certainly was part of the writers community that
Yes.
corresponded with each other and so forth. But from a fan perspective, you didn't run into the guy. But yeah, that added a little cloak of mystery maybe to him, or mystique
Hmm.
to him. But I don't know.
Yeah, he did seem, I think, literally and figuratively a bit of a distance, a little bit more. I think he seemed to project more of the intellectual kind of point of view.
Yes.
While Asimov was trying to be sort of a popular science kind of guy, I mean, Clarke seemed a little bit more distant in that sense.
Yes.
I don't know. That was just my impression.
Yeah, and we
And
should explain what we mean by hard science fiction. So hard science fiction is where,
don't drop it on your foot.
yeah, don't drop it on your foot. You'll just really regret it. And it's because it's so heavy because it's so laden with scientific accuracy. So
That's yeah,
a lot of hard science fiction is really kind of based on the ethic that it's interesting to play with the scientific and technological possibilities, but when you do, you want to play by the rules. You don't want to
right.
do silly things. And so, for example, there's a Larry Niven short story where there's some mysterious force that's killing people, and it turns out it's tidal forces, um, from a super dense collapsed star. Yeah, and there are other science fiction, both classic and modern, that are again have a lot of fidelity to the science. They may have some hand wavy elements, the faster
Sure.
than light drive, or artificial intelligences that really are self-aware and intelligent. But wherever possible, they try to be faithful to the science.
Yeah, I think the notion was, as I understood it as a kid, and I guess as I still understand it now, is hard science fiction is trying to cleave as close to possible to not only known science, but in projecting forward the fiction part of the science, it still should somehow connect to a reasonable possibility, with maybe a few exceptions. But even if you're going to do like FTL drive, it should be grounded in some concept that makes at least some potential scientific sense and not just technobabble. I think that's
Yes.
at least how I would understand it. And I think
Yeah.
there are gradations of it all. And I suspect that you had, four different nerds in a room and asking them to fight over whether a particular piece of fiction was hard or not. There'd be a
Hmm.
slap fight. So, I don't think there's any
Yeah. Were you much of
necessarily perfect answer to this.
were you much of a hard science fiction fan?
I mean, I think in my youth, at one point, I think I thought I was, but
Did
it,
you subscribe to Analog?
I read some analog. I don't think I subscribed to it. I think the only,
Because that was the magazine for I think for the
sure, yeah,
diehard hards SF
I
readers.
did not. Again, you're the short story guy, and I'm really not.
Hmm.
So I was never. I did subscribe for a while to FNSF.
Hmm.
I don't remember why, but I did. Um, and but I never. I read. I would maybe read random other publications, but I never
Okay.
subscribed to it. How about did you?
I did for a while.
Yeah.
And I wasn't, because we had the bookstore, I had kind of easier access to
Yeah. Yeah.
magazines, so a subscription wasn't strictly necessary. And I found some of the hard science fiction from this time kind of ponderous.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh,
Yeah,
yeah. I think that's fair.
it was really too much about the science,
Yeah. Yeah.
to often to a point where the stories were fairly leaden in their plotting.
I agree with that.
Yeah.
Now, I will say this. Maybe this helps. I did at one point have a subscription to Popular Science.
Okay.
And Omni,
Yes.
Omni magazine.
Scientific
And
American. I had a
I did
subscription to
not do
that.
Scientific American.
Okay.
But I also was, as a youngster, very enamored of Carl Sagan's Cosmos, and I had the book and all that kind of stuff. And did read a couple of his other books as a kid.
Not billions and billions of books.
Not billions, but billions and billions of words.
All right. So the starting point for discussion here about the connection between Arthur C. Clarke and this movie is that he wrote a short story called The Sentinel, which I alluded to earlier. And it has a lot of the same beats as 2001 does. So there are
Yes.
scientists exploring the moon. They discover an artifact there, and it turns out it's much like in 2001, a kind of a tripwire to inform the aliens who
Yeah.
built this artifact
Hmm.
that humanity has reached a particular point of development where they've become interesting.
And it
It's a
hated
very
mutants.
yeah, and it was a very short story.
Yeah.
I reread it yesterday, and it took me I think all of 10 minutes possibly.
Hmm.
Uh, but when Stanley Kubrick wanted to make a movie about aliens and space and all the subjects that we'll get into that were the themes of 2001, he had this collaboration with Clarke, and the two of them are credited for writing the screenplay.
Yes.
And also there's an interesting book that Clarke wrote about the baking of 2001 where he describes his input into the movie, and a lot of it is kind of incidental, not in the sense that it was peripheral to the making of the movie, but it was like, oh well, we have this idea and I'll call Stanley, or he'll call
Right.
me, and there's a back and forth that went on, and it also included Carl Sagan. uh
Yes, that's right.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So Kubrick took the collaboration with people in the science community and science fiction community very seriously in making this movie.
So I was reading, and I can't remember now where I read it, that the original goal was to write the book together and then write the movie, but they ended up kind of
Yeah,
doing it simultaneously. Therefore, there's some deviations between the two properties.
yes. And I don't know if like novelizations were a thing in 1968 when this came out. Now, later, there was when, we were very avid readers in our teens and young adulthood. If a movie came out, there was going to be a
Sure.
novelization of it. Uh,
But I think this is kind of unique because it really isn't a
yeah,
novelization in so much it's written while they're writing the script. So it's
right.
like
And so
it's
there are
almost like
differences.
co-birth.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
Um, did you have much awareness of Stanley Kubrick when you watched
I
this movie for
it's a
the first
name
time?
that I knew. I knew that he was a famous director. And as we'll find out shortly, I still have not really delved into his oeuvre. But
Yes.
I was aware of him even then that that was supposed to be a big deal, that it was a
Yes.
Kubrick movie.
Well, when I was 6, I certainly didn't have much awareness of
You didn't
Stanley
have a
Kubrick.
poster of Stanley Kubrick in your room?
Life-size cardboard cutout of
That's
Stanley
right.
Kubrick, who would
Sure, as one
who would
does.
like command me to do 57 takes of the same scene, so it would break me down the way he did Shelley Duvall. Uh, Anyway, but by the time I rewatched it, I was certainly aware of him,
Sure.
and I can't say I knew the exact timing, but around the same time, I also saw Clockwork Orange,
Hmm.
Spartacus, Doctor Strangelove, Paths of Glory, and then The Shining came out, yeah, 1980, I think. So,
Sounds about right.
yeah,
The only Kubrick movie I've seen is Spartacus, besides this one. The others are kind of on my list of things I should see. Doctor
hmm,
Strangelove it being at the top of my list that I've just never gotten around to watching. I've seen clips,
okay,
but and then The Shining would not have appealed to me as a kid because I did not like anything horror movies. It just wasn't my thing. Although I have a list of things I need to see. Those are on my list, but I don't think I know what Passive Glory is. I know what Clockwork Orange is, but
hmm,
anyway. So I'm
yeah,
not. I'm not. You're the cinephile.
I
I'm
know.
just the
Well, the young
weirdo.
cinephile felt the same way about these movies as I did about, reading Arthur C. Clarke as a science fiction fan. It was like, yes, I do not want to be thrown into the outer darkness. I have to go watch these, and they were
For
great.
sure.
They were great. I think I particularly at the time, well, Doctor Strangelove is fantastic, but
Yeah, yeah. It's
A Clockwork Orange was a shocking movie, and it left me wondering how I felt about it for a long time.
mhm.
Anyway, so this is a very influential film.
Yes.
It's It's often cited as one of the best films ever made, aside from one of the best science fiction movies ever made. For example, there's this Sight and Sound, the BFI, British Film Institute,
Hmm.
surveys that go out. They go out among a lot of people, including film critics, but among film directors in 2022, this was the number one movie. So this movie gets a lot of respect, and it's increased over the years if
Sure.
you follow that particular survey. But I think it also I think it wowed people in the 60s when it came out, and certainly there was a lot of respect for it in the 70s when I saw it again. But I think it kind of mushroomed a bit around the 70s and 80s in popularity. A lot of people will cite this as an inspirational film. Scientists, you read interviews with scientists and they talk about science fiction. They'll talk about Star Trek. They'll talk about 2001 as being reasons why they became scientific professionals. Certainly among SF readers and writers, 2001 is a big deal and something that really hooked people into the genre. And also among filmmakers who didn't necessarily go down the science fiction route. There was a really interesting article I dug up from The Guardian where people were talking about how 2001 inspired them. And not all of them became science fiction movie regulars the way that, uh, you know, someone like Christopher Nolan, you'd say,
Right.
was very science fiction friendly in his
Hmm.
film catalog. Okay, so that's a little bit of background. We could talk about hard science fiction and Stanley Kubrick and other things we've briefly skimmed over here, much longer, but we won't do that because we want to talk about our reactions at the time and the reactions now to the movie. Just warning listeners, there will be daylight or perhaps starlight between us. I don't think that we see exactly eye to eye on this film.
Not entirely, no. Not entirely. I have some frustrations with this movie. I think
Okay.
there's a lot that I can say that's superlative about the film. I understand why it ranks the way that it does. But I think there's a divide if you look at, I mean, I read a couple of reviews and looked at a couple of things. I mean, there is, even at the time, I think some divisiveness about this movie.
Hmm.
And I can see why that was the case. And I have thoughts. So, we we can
You
run down
do?
through it. Yeah, yeah, I do. Oddly
What?
enough. How could
Yeah.
it be? How could it be? Yeah. I'm I'm,
There
I'm
will
so known I'm so known for not having opinions about things.
there will
Yeah.
be our weekly complaint about following procedures.
There is definitely
It's
a
not as big
procedural
as in
moment.
other films that we've
No, but
covered,
it's pretty
but there's
significant.
just like a moment in particular that
Yeah.
even I will admit, as much as I love this movie, if you had to like sell somebody on watching this movie, how would you explain it to them and why they should watch it?
I would say that you should watch it because one, it does hold a particularly important place in the history of cinema in general, not just science fiction cinema. I think that it is a visually impressive and technically remarkable movie. But I would, and this is where my hang up is, I don't know if it's profound. We're going to disagree on how profound it is, I think, and we're going to
Hmm.
disagree about the narrative. I find the narrative profoundly unsatisfying, and that's really where the crux is the
Steven,
narrative. Yeah.
Steven, you're supposed to be selling somebody on this movie.
Oh, well, I'm telling that, well, honesty is honesty, man. It's well, you can cut out the part where I start talking about the narrative. That was my selling it on selling it. It
Okay,
is a
you
it is a
pivoted there pretty hard.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I got thoughts. Go ahead.
Okay. I would say
What's your
if I would say if you are at all interested in why people like science fiction of a particular type,
mm-hmm.
this movie is good. as an introduction to that. And if you do like that kind of science fiction, this is a great movie to watch. And I would say, oddly, for a guy who's known to be a hard science fiction staple, like Arthur
Hmm.
C. Clarke, like he wrote another book, Fountains of Paradise, I mentioned before, which said, what if we could build an elevator into space? Well, here are the benefits of doing that, and here's the scientific explanation of how you do it, right? That it was the hardest of hard science fiction. This movie doesn't lean heavily into hard SF for the central part of the story. I mean, there are elements of it certainly that, are trying to create a lot of scientific credibility in what you're seeing on the
Right.
screen. But what happens in this movie doesn't depend on hard science fiction at all. So don't be scared away by that. I mean, like if you were hearing us talk about Arthur C. Clarke and you said, "Well, that sounds a little too science geeky for me," I would
Hmm.
not say that that's the core of this movie.
Well, I don't know. I'm going to slightly disagree in the sense that I don't think that the climax of the movie is hard science fiction. I do
Mhm.
think the core of the movie is mostly a hard science fiction movie. It just, unless of course you're suggesting, and maybe you are, maybe you're right, that hard science fiction requires exposition on the science. But I
Yes,
think
that's what I
that
mean.
okay, well, there is not a lot of exposition about the science. That much is absolutely the case. I think that some of the display on the screen is like the silence in space and some of the way in which things move and behave is an attempt at least to visually demonstrate the hard science without saying it. How about
Yes,
that?
yes. And I think where that and I'm sure we'll talk about this more, but I think that that is valuable because it shows being faithful to science can be really cool. That the
Sure.
universe
No,
as it
it's
exists is an incredibly cool place. And
yeah,
I think
agreed.
that's part of why this movie inspired so many people to become
Hmm.
scientists, science fiction fans, science fiction
Hmm.
writers, whatever. Um, is there a simple summary of what the point of this movie is? I have my one word answer to that question.
I'm gonna keep that to the end, maybe. I
Okay.
don't know. I don't know that I have a one word. No, I don't have a one word. The answer is no, but I have thoughts. But I'm
Okay.
again, since you chastised me for deviating into my negativity, so I'm gonna wait on that one.
We're going to go through the different scenes of the movie or the different sections of the movie, I should say. We're not going to go scene by scene. That would be terribly dull. But overall, what did you like about the movie?
So again, I found the visuals from the beginning to the end to be pretty stunning, especially some of the specific, blocking and framing of some of the shots, especially the use of light, reflection. I found the usage of realistic attempts at displaying space travel was impressive. Whether again it was the silence instead of the whooshes and the all that stuff,
Hmm.
because space is you can't no one can hear you scream and they can't hear you whoosh either. Um, the technical achievement of like building the sets where they looked like they were in anti-gravity and walking in the like in the walking in the
Hmm.
circle, and the various sort of directional things that are a little disorienting, but would do if you had sort of fake gravity and no gravity. I found the mystery itself to be very compelling. Whether it's 4 million years ago or however long ago the beginning of the movie is to the moon to so forth and so on. I found the entire plot with Hal to be incredibly compelling.
Yes.
Well, I want to talk about how that fits into this film, though, and what it may or may not mean, because I think it's part of my frustration. And then, I found the usage of music and certain visuals to be impressive. All of those things are the things I like about this movie quite a lot. How about you?
All right. Well, I'm going to go on for a bit about the things that I like because I
No, go
really
right ahead.
like this movie.
No, it's totally fair.
The first thing I want to say, and this was really striking on this rewatch for me, is that if you really engage with this movie in the proper way, and by that I mean go someplace to watch it where you're not going to be distracted. Make sure that there aren't going to be reflections on the screen, intrusions. Like I started to watch it on my iPad and I said, "Okay, Tom, stop. This is ridiculous. This isn't going to work. You're not really watching the movie the way it's intended to be watched or deserves to be watched." Um, if you really give it your full attention, it will make you incredibly thoughtful. And I think it's in some ways unique in that respect. And I'll talk a little bit about what the uh, kind of what the main mechanism I found this time around to be for making you in a thoughtful state of mind, or mindfulness, as the kids say these days. But yeah, I think that there's a lot to think about in the movie, both about the big ideas in the movie, as well as like in particular scenes, like what's actually happening here, or what's this person thinking, or how are they going to get out of this horrible situation that they're in. But I think it is uniquely a thoughtful movie, and I think that's a great thing. How it does it a lot of the time is through silence, where there isn't necessarily dialogue. It might not be appropriate for, let's say, especially like the first section of the movie, The Dawn of Man, and the last section of the movie just doesn't make sense to have dialogue in those two sections. But there's not a lot of dialogue. Uh, there's not a lot of music. I know it's known for the
Hmm.
music, right?
Right.
Thus Sprach Zarathustra and the Blue Danube
Hmm.
Waltz, and I mentioned that Khachaturian selection of music before. It's known for that, but it's there very precisely for a particular scene for a particular purpose. Like the Thus Sprach Zarathustra is sort of an announcement of something happening in this movie that fits in directly with what the theme of it is. And we're still dancing around what the theme of it is. But I like the EVA sequences. Like it's realistic
Hmm.
to have somebody who's going on a spacewalk to not hear anything other than the sound
Right.
of his own breath.
Yes.
And that's incredibly effective. I mean, because I think it makes you feel like oh my God, this character is this, tiny, fragile
Hmm.
creature in
Oh
the,
yeah.
the great void of outer space. But it also is making you think a lot. Like, okay, when, Bowman is going out to retrieve Poole's body,
Hmm.
like, what does he think about what's happening here? What's he going to do when he catches up with him? What's Hal doing in the meantime back on the spaceship? That again, it's not telling you these things; it's making you think about them in the moment, and I think that's fantastic. I think some people might say, well, the movie is a little bit slow. Possibly that's true in some cases. Maybe you feel that that's the case. It didn't feel that way to me this time. Like the Dawn of Man
Right.
section, I saw in the notes you thought it was a little bit boring.
I
It didn't
did. Yeah.
strike me the same way.
And that's totally fair. And to be clear, people can have different opinions, and that's awesome. I I did whatever that means. I
That was almost a bless your heart, Stephen.
It did. I didn't intend for it to be.
Bless your heart for loving this movie
I'm
so much.
trying not to. I'm trying not to use you as a proxy for my frustration.
Okay.
And so I'm trying not to, and I also don't want to, as they say, yuck your yum. The things that
Yuck
you
my
love,
yum.
that's totally. I mean, that it's just, anyway. I So like this is the kind of thing I end up doing because this is the person I am. I figured out that there's like half an hour at the beginning and a half an hour at the end of this movie. There's no dialogue.
Hmm.
And in fact, according to Google, there's maybe 40 minutes of dialogue in the whole movie, which on one level, fine. And as Roger Ebert, who wrote a very glowing review of this, like after the fact at some point, said it was almost like a silent film, and there was sort of and I understand sort of the contemplative aspects of the film.
Hmm.
Um, I I nonetheless found, especially in the beginning sequence, I guess part of the core question that I end up ultimately have about this film is what's the point supposed to be, which I already sort of alighted a moment ago into what I think it is. I'm not sure that I know. There is a narrative in the movie, right? There's a narrative, and the narrative is connected by the obelisks, ultimately, the monoliths from the beginning to the end. It's clearly linked to an alien intelligence
Hmm.
that has some kind of goal. Now, I know that one of our points of contention often is how much explanation there should be in things. And I'm not asking for there to have been at the end like a dude sitting at a desk telling Dave, well, here's what's been going on the whole time.
Hmm.
That's not what I'm after. But I feel like that it's unclear as to what the point of all of it was from the beginning to the end, except was it to get a Sioux specimen at the end? Was that the point from the alien point of view? I'm confused by that, and I remain confused by that. And so like the part with the primates at the beginning, which initially it's interesting. Um, I'd remembered, it's funny, like I said, I haven't watched this movie many times. I
Hmm.
remembered the beginning, but I remembered it being shorter. I totally forgot the whole moon stuff, except for I remember the flight to the space station, but I
Yeah.
forgot being on the moon for the most part. I kind of remember I was watching it. I vividly remember the HAL stuff. And
Hmm.
then, you called me while I was still watching it, and I said I kind of forgot the end. No, I remember the end. It was what I remembered. Although it was longer than I remembered.
Yeah.
So and at some point with the primates and the dawn of man, I'm not quite sure what the length of this is supposed to be communicating to me.
Okay. Well, let's just get into the different
So
sections
let's
of the
talk
movie
about,
then.
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Rather than continue to talk at a high level, let's just
Yeah,
get
yeah.
into the nitty
Please.
gritty here. So it starts with the dawn of man. So there
Hmm.
are primates. I don't know if it's supposed to be Australopithecus or
It's
what
unclear, yeah.
hominid it is, but the precursors of humanity
Hmm.
living in Africa.
Yes.
Um, Now you thought it was unclear what the purpose of that was.
Well, to me, the purpose was, and you can tell me if I'm what your interpretation is. I mean, to me, what the whole that section is, it demonstrates that that they are at first vegetarians.
Hmm.
They're eating just plants, and they're living with alongside some other animals. And I'm blanking on what kind of animals they were, but they weren't tapirs or something else. But
I think they were tapirs.
maybe they were tapirs. So
Yeah.
and there's a little conflict between two groups of primates over a watering hole,
Hmm.
demonstrating some kind of conflict, precursor conflict. And then at one point, one group wakes up and there's the monolith is there. The first time we see the monolith, this black, the sentry basically, but
Yes.
and they encounter it. And at some point thereafter, one of them figures out that it can use a bone as a tool,
Hmm.
which he then uses as a weapon to both kill the animals that become carnivores at that point and also kill one of the opposing groups. And there's a famous scene where he throws the bone up in the air and it transforms into a spaceship, and then we're in the future. Okay, so my interpretation of that is somehow the monolith is creating an evolutionary moment for the primates. Is that your interpretation or not your
Oh,
interpretation?
definitely, definitely. That
So
whoever the aliens are through the monolith, they're having an influence on the evolution of humanity.
so
And
I don't know
again,
that I
it's
needed.
all very woo-woo. I mean, Clarke is known, for the quote about, any science of,
Yeah.
particular,
Yes.
kinds of, level of advancement is going to appear as
It's
magic.
magic. Yes.
Right. And here just the monolith appears and it's doing something, but we're not sure
Yes.
what it is other than we see the effect of it. And
Right.
it's still really kind of unclear where the movie is going at this point, other than
Yes.
something mysterious is happening, and probably it'll make more sense as we go from there.
Yes. That I think is correct. But so two comments on one. I don't know the sequence needed to be. It was almost half an hour. I don't know that it needed to be
Yeah.
that long to communicate what I just described. So there's that. But that's a I'm known for complaining about how long things take. So, you know, all right, maybe I'm artistically incorrect on this, but that
Yeah.
was it just felt like wasn't necessary. And then I guess then we can maybe leave hanging because we're getting ahead of ourselves. I agree. Is this story going to help me understand why this happened? I don't think it ever does, and that's one of my frustrations. Maybe you think that it does.
Well, I don't think it. I don't think it even tries to. But I think what it's trying to show in the first section of the movie is that our precursors really were animals. Like they're living
Sure.
side by side with the tapirs,
Hmm.
eating off the same bushes,
Hmm.
kind of living day to day, often as prey for animals. The
Hmm.
leopard that jumps
Yep.
out and kills one of the primates. Uh, and I think then it's intended to say, well, it's incredible the advancement that happens because of evolution. Whether it's caused by an alien monolith or whether it's just natural processes. It's like,
Hmm.
look how far we've come from just being animals. And it's shot beautifully. And it's not just
Hmm.
like, woo, that's a pretty landscape, but it really makes you feel like you're there. And
Hmm.
yeah, the makeup on the actors who are playing the Australophithecines or whatever they are is terrific. And so you really kind of get a sense that yeah, these are the animals that we used to be. I, that I think is the purpose of
No, I
the
think that
first part of the movie.
that part is fair, and I certainly understand and appreciate the notion that there is uh, a point to be made about how far the species comes over time. I just feel like that's muddied in some way by the idea that the monolith creates the evolution. That just, it just that's a
Mhm.
story point that I don't. I just, to me, it then makes you think less about, to me at least, it makes me think less about the broader theme that you've just described and more about,
Hmm.
well, why is this monolith here and why would these aliens want to make us evolve? That that inserts that question at that moment in time in my mind.
That's interesting because I never really worried about that, like the
Yeah.
why this was happening.
I just figure here's the deal, and maybe this is the core part of my
Hmm.
problem. If you're going to tell a story, and this is a core question that I have about this and other stories, and there's more than one answer, so I'm not saying that there's a definitive answer to what I'm about to ask. But when the artist, the writer, the author, whatever term you want to use, inserts something dramatic into a narrative
Hmm.
that is clearly not, it's clearly meant to be an agitator of some kind. It's a plot point, a person, in this case, a large black slab that clearly has an effect on the story. I think it's fair for the reader, the consumer, to ask, why did the author do this? Now, maybe the author doesn't know, and we can have these arguments about whether authorial intent matters or whether the author lies, as my literature teacher used to say in high school. All this is all possible, and I'm not saying but it still, I think, raises a question. You could have had that sequence of the ape learning to use a tool,
Hmm.
make the point that you interpret this section as meaning,
Yes.
and not had the monolith there at all and discovered the one on the moon later and still have the same, I think, arc of from ape to space travel. I don't know what the monolith is supposed to do in this particular case. And that it does frustrate me in that from a narrative point of view, why did you do this? There has to
Yeah.
be a reason.
Well, I think, when we get to the last part, I'll have a lot to say about this. But I think here you have the kind of the first intimation of the aliens, whoever they are, as being
Hmm.
so advanced from us that their mechanism
Hmm.
of intervening in our development is incomprehensible. And there's a
Hmm.
lot about the aliens that would just not be
No,
comprehensible to either the Australopithecines or
mhm.
Homo sapiens. And I think that's
Yeah.
kind of like what makes the choral music so effective.
Hmm.
So you hear these voices. It's like when you hear people talking, but you don't understand what they're saying because they're speaking in a different
Yeah,
language or
yeah. Hmm.
whatever. And it's also just pretty cool sounding, but
Sure, sure, sure.
but it's like that sense like I'm hearing something, but I'm not getting it, or I'm seeing
Hmm.
something and I don't
Right.
understand it. That I think is what the intent of the monolith and other
Hmm.
aspects of the aliens manifestation here are trying to be. All right. Anything more about the first part of the
No,
movie?
we can move on from the primates.
Okay. So then you have the big transition to the modern day
Yes.
and the scientist Haywood Floyd going to the moon and as you said, the classic shot of the ape who's figured out how to use a tool, throwing it up in the
Hmm.
air, and transforming into a spaceship. And at that point, I think the question is, are we measuring our advancement by our technology? Like to have gone from bones used as weapons
Right.
to spaceships that can
Yes.
shuttle you back and forth to a moon base.
No, I think
Um,
the importance of tools is tools and technology, but that is essential to the film, correct? I think.
okay. You forgot about the moon section? Did you like the moon
No,
section?
I remember the space station part. I
Yes.
just forgot the conference and I think I mostly forgot the conference. And I kind of
Hmm.
vaguely remember they found a monolith on the moon. No, I thought this it was an interesting. It's in some ways a rather dramatic transition. I mean, again, the movie I think acceptably it dwells on sort of the wonder of space travel. You've got the floating pin, and you've got the woman walking
Hmm.
in with the grip boots, whatever it said on her shoes, and the whole ballet of docking the ship is all impressive. And then they have,
Hmm.
and I think he does a really good job, or the Kubrick and whoever did the set designs and whatnot does a good job, I think, of creating a near future that's believable.
Yes.
Although it amused me. This is a total side note, right? There are a lot of name brands, and only Hilton survived, right? Howard Johnson's gone,
Pan
Bell
Am
Labs
gone.
gone, Pan Am gone.
Yeah.
There's something else, but yeah, but Pacific Bell or whatever it was, Bell the Bell phone thing.
Hmm.
But Hilton, they still persist, and I appreciate that because I have a lot of H honors points, so it's important. But you know, but I think the design, the aesthetic, it didn't feel even now unreasonable, although at that point it's set in our past. But
Right.
forget that part. I think it worked pretty well. How about you?
Yeah. I mean, I think that it's showing you what we can do today. I mean, what you're seeing on the screen in the movie is not too far from where we were in 1968, because this is, right before the moon landing, and
Yes.
people had anticipated it would not be a big stretch then to have actual moon bases or
Hmm.
uh, you know, colonization of the planets or whatever. So it was really within our grasp. And then and seeing how cool it was, like the space docking sequence,
Hmm.
is deliberate. It isn't
Yes.
just like it flies into the space
Right.
station and we're done. It's playing the Blue Danube, and you're looking at the ballet between,
Hmm.
the space station and the docking spaceship. And that's you're intended to say, wow, that's wonderful, right? And
Yeah.
being able to overcome the problems of gravity by spinning the space station and all these things, again,
Hmm.
trying to put you in a thoughtful mood, right? Not
No,
just
and
like, let's get to the next plot point. It's,
right.
damn, this is pretty cool.
No, I think that's absolutely the case. It's impressive and cool. And also, as I wrote my notes and through the entire, and we get to the moon, we have not only the meeting on the moon, but they go out to where they found the other monolith. And visually, this movie starts to remind me, as I said to you on the phone, I start to see how the guys that made Bob Wise and those guys that made TMP, Star Trek: The
Hmm.
Motion Picture, how they were influenced by this movie in terms of a lot of the flybys and the music, and then the scene on the moon where they dug up the device reminded me of Close Encounters when they're
Yes.
at the end. So
Well, there
I
is a
can
Close
certainly see.
Encounters connection through Doug Trumbull, who did the special effects.
There you go.
So again, it's hard when you have seen the movie or heard about the movie in advance to kind of recreate the sense of surprise at something. But you're as foreshadowed. There's something weird going on the moon. They're covering things up. Oh, by the way, a sort of that guy moment was the Russian scientist. It
Yes.
was from a British sitcom I used to really like, The Fall and Rise of Reginald Perrin.
Oh, I'm not familiar. I
Complete
did look him up
tangent.
because I thought he was familiar, but I didn't recognize from anything. That's funny. Yeah.
Yeah. There was a running joke on that show about he would sit down and the cushion on the chair in his boss's office would act like a whoopee cushion. Anyway,
Oh
so
my
like when he
God.
sat down, I was expecting a at that moment, but happily did not get it. Anyway, but it was still I still remember being really impressed, buy the discovery on the moon. Like they don't, it's going to be something
Right.
amazing. It's going to be something alien related. It's going to be something transformative,
Hmm.
but I thought it was really well handled. Just that segue then into
It's a
walking
good.
down into the
Yes.
dig and then seeing the monolith again. It's like, wow, the monolith again. What is going on here?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, and I don't think it's a stretch then to anticipate that it is a kind of another landmark in development that the people who have found it don't appreciate it, but we as the audience do. That this thing has
Hmm.
shown up again the way that it did at this critical point in evolution in the first part of the movie. Um, Anything else about the moon scenes?
Space food sucks.
Apparently,
It's awful.
it's just liquefied. You suck it through straws
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
from a tray. Um, but kind of the production design is great in this
No, it's
movie, as you
great.
said.
It really
Yeah,
is. It really, really
yeah.
is.
Including like we mentioned, this shows up more in the discovery in the next section of the film, but that's like these little subtle touches, like the fact that the tables are slightly curved to follow the
Hmm.
curve of the
Hmm.
space station or the spaceship. Really neat. Okay, so then there is the Discovery's mission to Jupiter, the two astronauts plus the scientists who are in hibernation. Um, is this the heart of the movie, do you think? Or is this just another part of the overall narrative?
Yeah. Pardon me. That's a good question. I think it's a central question that I'm grappling with. I think in some ways it is the heart of the movie,
Hmm.
but in some ways, and again, this is where my narrative frustration comes in. I'm not sure what this part of the movie actually means to the overall narrative, if that makes any sense. In the following way, right? So this is the part where we've got the two guys we've got Bowman and we've got Poole, and they're the ones that are awake. You got three others. I think there are three others they're in hibernation, and they're supposed to be going to this point in Jupiter. I don't know that they know why at this point. They've been sent because we find out later why. That's what the
Hmm.
signal from the moon was sent. And we've got HAL 9000, who is this AI that runs the ship and has this very smooth, soothing way of speaking, which becomes kind of creepy later. This is the part I think that is in many ways penetrated pop culture more than anything else, right? If there's a line
Yeah.
anybody knows from this movie, it's, "I'm sorry, Dave, I can't do that," right?
Hmm.
And either that or just also Sprach Zarathustra. But but it's the part of the movie that has the most actual activity and drama.
Hmm.
But then I'm left with the lingering question of, was Hal's malfunction a coincidence? Was it caused by the aliens? You may not care, which is totally fine. I kind of care because if it's a coincidence, it's this weird side story in this
Hmm.
otherwise other part of the movie. And if it's the aliens, I think the thing about the aliens that frustrate me in that sense then is they could communicate better if they wanted to and they choose not to. And I don't. I feel like there's enough of their capacity to interfere with humanity, whether going back to the evolution thing, 4 million, how many million years in the past. The one on the moon's 4 million years. I'm not sure how long the one on Earth was supposed to be.
Hmm.
And if they can, in fact, manipulate Hal, and if they can, in fact, then take Dave, I just feel like they could communicate if they wanted to, and they don't.
Yes.
Which maybe is that they're just so alien that's the way it is. And maybe we're
Well,
no more
they're not
important than
communicating
zoo
yet
animals. But
until until Bowman gets there to where the monolith is waiting at
right, but
Jupiter.
right, but the,
I don't think that that Hal was influenced by the aliens at all.
so you think it's just a coincidence that he malfunctioned?
Well, I think it plays an important role in the story. So this is a story about evolution. That's my one word
Right.
summary
Okay.
of this film. And I think that Hal is an evolutionary dead end. I think that we're intended to kind of see a couple of things through Hal. One is technology isn't everything.
Hmm.
What Bowman eventually becomes isn't just like is not like a cyborg or something where the technology gets better. He's a different sort of being, just as we're different beings from our evolutionary
Hmm.
predecessors. So then in that sense, I think he's intended to say don't rely too much on technology to understand human evolution, what we mean by advancement. Um, I
I'm
also
going to
think
be
that, go ahead.
I'm going to be Dr. Difficult right in here and point out that the that the evolution in this movie is all created by the technology of the aliens.
You blew my mind, man.
Because it's not about evolution then. It's
But
about
that's fine.
technology.
No, no, it's the technology used to uplift humanity. So did you ever read the Uplift War? Or the Uplift stories by
No.
David Brin? So
No.
this is told from the standpoint of like humanity is part of a community of different alien species, and we're not supposed to yet have permission in order to advance in the evolution of dolphins, apes, other creatures from planet Earth, and we kind of get into trouble for doing that.
Mhm.
That's kind of the plot of the book. So I think the technology here is just the same way as in that novel that we're seeing it there from the human point of view, just kind of using technology to create either sentient beings or whatever the Star Child is at the end of
Right.
2001, whatever kind of super being that is.
He's a Q. Um, or an Organian
He could
or
be.
but regardless, that was
Yeah.
I but do you see my point though? I mean, it to me, if it really were about human evolution, our capacity to evolve over time from primates to Star Child or wherever, or just to be able to fly to Jupiter,
Mhm.
it's somewhat tainted in my mind if it's all being manipulated by some higher power. It's not really evolution at that point, is it?
It is that we have demonstrated a sufficient level of advancement that we, according to whatever the aliens' code of conduct is, we're ready to proceed to whatever the next stage is. I mean, that's the point of placing the breadcrumbs, the
Hmm.
monolith on the moon that then points to
Hmm.
Jupiter, and then
Hmm.
finding having the wherewithal to get to Jupiter, is that we have progressed to a certain point, and they're for whatever reason helping us make the next step. And I don't know if we would ever make that step on our own or whatever, but I think that's the intended narrative here. And we don't know the aliens' purposes behind
Hmm.
providing that help, but it's just sort of taken as a given.
Okay. I'm thinking now. I'm thinking.
But also, yeah, I'll say like evolutionary dead end that there's no mechanism for Hal to evolve. He is just a computer, and even though
Right.
he is efficient, that doesn't necessarily make him great evolutionary material, if you see what I'm saying.
I do see the thematic issue you're pointing to, which I had not
Yes.
considered the evolution because I'm still sidetracked by the fact that it's, dare I say, intelligent design and not evolution.
Yeah.
But and therefore I understand thematically in the film
Hmm.
how could be considered evolutionary dead end, but if technology can improve humans, technology could improve HAL 9000 too, could it not?
Right. Could you create artificial intelligence that improves itself?
Well, I
Possibly.
mean, I guess my point is this: if you had uh, you've built a better HAL 9000, how is that any different than the aliens making Dave into the Star Child?
Um, there wouldn't be. I mean,
Yeah,
I think that it's entirely possible to imagine that being again sort of an uplifting moment that humans did to something, not a biological entity, but a machine entity.
right.
I also think that they really do question, like right at the beginning, whether Hal is even sentient.
Yeah, they do. Yeah,
Yeah,
they do.
like
Which is legitimate. Yeah.
yeah, like Poole, Gary Lockwood's character says, I don't know if he's really intelligent or not, but he sure seems that way, so that's the way we'll treat
Well,
him.
yeah, and I think that's an interesting and obviously, given our current moment with AI,
Yeah.
how it becomes more interesting in that sense. And the whole question, right, is a large language model actually intelligent or is it just smart enough to quote unquote replicate human behavior,
Right.
right?
Well, it's the Turing test, right? That,
Right.
the old concept of, well, if it seems like you're talking to a human being, then it's intelligent. And I think this is a direct challenge to that. It's saying that's not a good standard for intelligence.
Isn't the Turing test about self-awareness?
Uh, it's
Or am
about
I
intelligence.
forgetting?
Like is the machine
Yeah,
intelligent? Yeah.
right.
And I think you're right. I mean, is it self-awareness? Is it conscious? But
Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
Which is hard to measure is sort of the core problem. I mean, I found so to just focus on this as sort of storytelling. I mean, this sequence from the moment they realize that Hal's made a mistake
Hmm.
through until the point that Dave disconnects Hal
Yeah.
is, I think, an impressive sequence in the film. It is the most narratively coherent, to my mind, part of the
Hmm.
film. It's the part that has the most stakes for the most part. Well, because four people die. I mean, I have some quibbles about some things, but I still Dave's initial response to Poole's death is wanting in my mind. I'm not quite sure what's going on,
Hmm.
but um, but the interaction with Hal, I think, is quite fascinating for all the reasons we've described.
Yeah.
But again, if it's just sort of coincidence, it's just weird to me in the overall narrative of the movie. It
Well,
just,
so Hal is coldly rational,
yes,
um, but he's willing to murder,
yes,
as the conclusion to his rationality, including the people in hypersleep. I
correct.
forgot just how shocking that was. Just,
Yeah, yeah,
okay, he's switching them off. Goodbye.
yes, right.
Um, he lashes out uh, against human beings in a way that could be interpreted as the way that uh, kind of advanced intelligence then equipped the apes that we saw at the beginning
Yeah.
of the movie.
Murder was
To
the first application of the tool.
I know. I mean that that bothered me a little bit. It's like every evolutionary step going to be defined by the violence that now can
Yes,
be wreaked on less advanced beings. Um, he has, of course, that creepy superficial calm.
right.
And it's funny. I don't know if you had this reaction, but the scene where he's shut down always
Uh,
feels sad to me.
yeah, it is sad. It does feel
And
sad.
it's almost like playing on our own perception of like, is Hal
Right.
a sentient being or not?
Well, so here's a question, and we're talking about this, and I don't have an answer, but it occurs to me, I think it's worth asking. On the one hand, you can make the argument, which I think is a valid argument, that Hal's an evolutionary dead end, but by the same token, the film tells us in the Dawn of Man that the ability to murder your enemies is actually part of evolution. So is maybe his capacity to kill is not the dead end.
Yeah,
Maybe
or
it's
maybe
it.
that's the first effect. It's not the only
Yeah,
effect, but it's
right.
one of the first effects of making that sort of quantum step
Yeah.
up in advancement. Um, Anything else about this sequence? I think it is really the kind of the most uh, manageable
Yeah, it is,
from a movie viewing
and maybe
standpoint.
we're all revealing my inability to operate at a higher plane of a movie, and all I can focus on is this particular narrative section. But
Hmm.
it also is a beautifully shot sequence. I mean, I think there are a couple of things, and I guess there's another pod scene that got cut at one point, but I mean, there was some repetition that I'm not sure was entirely necessary. Like the
Hmm.
first time that Dave goes out in the pod and all you can hear is his breathing, I think was incredibly effective. The
Yeah.
second time they did it, I could have done a little less of it because all I felt was I was just repeating the exact same
Hmm.
experience. I did not, so that I didn't, like I said, I didn't totally understand. It's weird for a movie that is often incredibly meticulous in what it shows.
Hmm.
It does occasionally leave things out. Like we don't see the pod hit Pool. I don't know if that was an artistic choice, if it was a technical decision, right? We see the pod moving and all of a sudden we see Pool flying, but we don't see the actual what happens.
Right.
And then the way Dave reacts, it's not entirely clear to me that Dave understands what happened. Although he kind of does, because he's obviously in a panic because to your procedure point from earlier, he leaves his helmet behind when he gets in the pod.
Yeah.
I'm not sure why he goes after the body. Now, I find all that very frightening. I realize that I do have this sort of in any of these EV situations.
Hmm.
I am all not just this movie. There are other movies, but I couldn't think of a great example beyond this one. But it says like it's scary to be outside of a spaceship to me,
Yes.
and and in some ways, I'm like, should there be like more tethers or something? Shouldn't there be a better way to to do this? Like when they park the pod, to me, they park it way far away from the ship. And
Yes.
I'm like, that just doesn't seem like a very good way of doing any of this.
Yeah, I
Sure,
had
there's a
the
way to
same
like
thought. That's awfully
follow along
far.
the outside
Yeah.
of the ship. I also wondered, and this is me being a nerd after a while, I'm like, how do they maintain? Because presumably the Discovery is moving pretty quickly.
Hmm.
How does the pod not float off? How does it remain perfectly static? And this is one of the areas in which I think, for a movie that does a great job, I think of some of the realistic aspects of space exploration, they still either didn't think about or fudged on certain things. And that's one of them. Why would the pod remain static with the ship?
Well, if it's on the same relative path as the ship, there's no reason for it to
If it were moving,
moving.
but it comes as pointed, actually pointed at the ship. Why
Right.
would it be propulsing in parallel with the ship? It didn't make sense to me. But
Well,
then
if it,
that's
so like if you accelerate away from the ship, like you're
right,
perpendicular to the ship, you're
right,
still going to be moving in the
right,
direction of the ship.
right. But
There is still
uh,
that momentum in that
sure,
direction.
sure. And also,
Anyway,
when he grabs the body, it should have had an effect on the pod, but that's a different
well,
problem.
I think the pod has jets that we don't necessarily see in
Yeah.
operation, but I think that the purpose
No,
of
I'm just getting
not showing the collision between the
picky.
pod and the body was
Yeah.
we're seeing Dave's point of view. Like he wouldn't go out of the ship necessarily if he saw the
No,
pod slam
no, but to that
into
point
pool.
though, I mean, we were on the
Yeah.
outside of the ship. Then we go inside. Then we're back outside. That's the way it cuts.
Mhm.
We see the pod moving. So we were on the God view at one point.
Yeah.
Then we briefly go back inside the ship, and again, it's not clear that Dave even knows what happens. I think it just there's a
He
weird.
just right. He just sees the two objects moving, right?
I'm
So
not the only one.
we know what happened, but he doesn't.
Even Ray Bradbury thought this part was weird, so I'm in good
Oh,
company.
okay. Okay. Well, who am I to argue with Ray
That's right.
Bradbury?
So don't I'm pulling the expert card. It's not me. It's Ray Bradbury,
Who has
man.
even bigger and thicker glasses than us, so he was a
Exactly.
bigger geek than
So anyway,
were I.
and of course the sequence when he has to get back in the ship is great. Although again, I thought that well, I'm complaining about physics again. I would have thought the
Hmm.
explosive decompression would have forced the pod away from the ship, but it doesn't. That's okay.
Yeah.
Um, but it's very dramatic and very cool. And yes, when he's floating around, disconnecting, and there's some great visuals, and I put some of them in the notes that I sent you. You know, all the way that he
Yeah.
used light and reflection is
Hmm.
impressive. And then the red inside the computer core and all these things was fantastic. And I agree, it is kind of a sad one. You know, he's saying "I'm afraid,"
Yes.
and then slowly going back in time and singing the song, and all of the stuff is
Well,
very
he's
impressive.
desperate. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. He panics.
Um, and then we get the that sequence of explaining why they're there, and
Hmm.
then that's the last time anybody talks for the rest of the movie.
Yeah. I thought this time around Haywood Floyd was sort of a pompous ass, but
Yeah, he was.
yeah. But we've known people like that who are
Oh, sure.
in the scientific
Absolutely.
profession.
Yes.
One
Yes.
might even say we're pompous asses. But anyway.
Very likely.
Okay, so then we get to the ending. So do you want me just to
Yeah.
kind of give you my reading on what
Please go
the
right
ending
ahead.
is about?
Sure.
So here's what so Bowman has reached the monolith, and
Hmm.
then the wacky light show happens, the
Hmm.
psychedelic
Yes.
light show that
Yes.
confuses a lot of people. I think what we're seeing again is the aliens trying to communicate with Bowman in terms that he's not ready yet to understand, right? He hasn't made the next step, but he's showing them things that are changing him. And I think that's the purpose of like the close-ups on the eye. You see
Hmm.
the,
Yeah. Yeah.
the super close-up on the eye blinking and so forth.
Hmm.
Anyway, so that's kind of like almost the definition of a movie. Like you want to be changed by the movie that you see, or the filmmaker wants to make you changed by the movie that you see. So they're showing him some sort of movie And maybe they're transporting him to real places. We don't know, but it is changing him. And you get to that section where after the light show,
Right.
there are the kind of like the flyover of landscapes.
Hmm.
Yeah, and that's almost, I don't really think that there's an absolute right explanation for that. I think it might
Hmm.
be showing Bowman where humanity has come from. Like this is like going
Hmm.
back to the Olduvai Gorge at the beginning of the movie. Maybe it's showing him just other worlds. I don't know about that part of it.
Right.
But there are now that he after that, I believe he's when he starts seeing things that almost look like galaxies and nebulae, but they don't
Hmm.
quite
Right.
look the way that we see them. And I kind of took that to be, and I'm not saying listeners this is the absolute right interpretation, but we're seeing him look at the universe differently. Like maybe those
Right.
are nebulae, and
Hmm.
maybe those are galaxies, but
Right.
he's seeing it now as the proto star child that's quickly developing here. Now, then you get to the room,
Hmm.
and Kubrick did this interview on the phone in 1980 where he said that was a zoo.
Yeah.
Um, this is where like I don't know if the authorial intent
Hmm.
necessarily needs to be
Right.
respected completely. I almost understood that to say these are the moments when the aliens are trying to tell him you got to let go of who you were. Like they
Hmm.
give him this room that looks like it's furnished in a fancy way. It looks like he's living a good life there. He's enjoying what he's eating and what he's drinking. He breaks the glass, and kind of like intimation that all things have to come to an end. Sometimes existence is the form that you're clinging to right now is fragile, and then he sees himself aging
Hmm.
and eventually, on his deathbed. And that is then the moment when the star child is born.
Hmm.
And we see that entity returning to Earth. Who knows what happens then? Or really even what he is, because this is again beyond the comprehension of Homo sapiens. We're
Right.
again seeing intimations of things. So much like you don't really understand what the voices are saying when the monolith
Hmm.
appears.
Hmm.
These are visuals that suggest something that we can't understand
Right.
from the Homo sapiens point of view. Again, I think all of this is intended to make us thoughtful. We're intended to be confused, but
Hmm.
still struggling to grasp at what's happening here. And at a base level, we understand that Bowman has made the big next evolutionary leap. That's my reading of the final sequence.
That's I think a totally fair reading. I don't I'm not I wouldn't argue with it. My interpretation the first time I watched it and watching it this week, I thought that he was traveling to a distant place. That's what I thought the
Mhm.
Stargate was doing, and I thought that I had a similar thought about the landscape portion, whether it was supposed to be I thought it was a parallel to the Earth thing, and that it was a different planet. But I don't know that it's at all clear. I can certainly see your point that I had not considered that it was some attempt at communication. I did feel like there was a time distortion going on. I
Yeah.
didn't totally understand why he was seeing himself. I also didn't understand some of the because it's very it's he's in the pod, then he's in his space suit, then he's at the table, then he's in bed, and every time he's kind of seeing himself, which is
Mhm.
interesting, but I don't know what it's supposed to mean. That's fine. And um,
Well, that's why
I,
I like the explanation, which again might not have been Kubrick's intent, that this isn't a zoo, but it's instruction, right? It's showing him things that were completely alien, baffling,
yeah,
terrifying. Like he's screaming at one point,
yeah,
those still shots of him, and they say, "Okay, this is what you're giving up. You really like this, but now it's time to move on." And that's why
yeah. I
he's
mean,
watching
I
himself.
don't. Yeah, I think that's not unfair. I think that requires, which is fine, and maybe this is, it requires a certain amount of inference that's not in the text.
Hmm.
I think that I did, by the way, and I don't know, maybe I read the Zoo thing many years ago and forgotten that I thought Zoo when I watched it. And then I saw the Kubrick thing after I watched the movie. That's what it
Yeah,
felt like was the case, that he was on display in some capacity for these aliens.
maybe he was being studied, and
Yeah, I mean, and it's impossible to know,
yeah,
and I struggle with otherwise what's going on with this portion of the film, and maybe this is all my shortcoming, and then even and why would what's displayed be the next evolutionary stage? It baffles me to a degree. It
hmm
almost feels, here's how I feel about it, and it's not to all denigrate your interpretation, which I think is actually a pretty good interpretation. It's the kind of thing that feels to me like it is presented to be profound, but I'm not sure that it is as profound. And then it
hmm
requires us to sort of then figure out what it means in a way that I don't know. I'm not sure. I'm not articulating myself very well, but I don't know if it's as profound as it's supposed to be. That's my question. Especially if Cooper can only come up with he's in a zoo. That even kind of
okay.
points to the fact that maybe he doesn't know what it means either, which is fine. I don't know that we have to know what it means in some final sense. That's not the argument I'm making. I just there is because there is this connectivity, right? You got monolith at the
Hmm.
beginning with the primates. You got monolith on the moon, which is supposed to point you to Jupiter. The monolith at Jupiter that takes you to wherever it takes you to at the end.
Right.
And all of this is to serve the interest of these aliens, in my
Hmm.
opinion. In my opinion, that ultimately all that happens in this movie, and humanity doesn't learn anything. Dave maybe learned something. That's entirely possible, and maybe that's all
Hmm.
that matters, that Dave learned something. But humanity doesn't learn anything, and I'm not even sure why the aliens would be doing what they're doing. I guess if the aliens can create all this kind of change in humanity, then I just feel like they could have communicated in a way with us. Maybe they can't. Maybe this is like they're like gods, and it's beyond our capacity to comprehend. And maybe Dave can as the Star Child or at the end.
Well, so I
Is
so
it not?
here's a
No, go
point of
ahead.
comparison.
Go ahead.
Star Trek and the super aliens that we were talking about
Hmm.
a couple of episodes ago. Perpetually there would be an alien that would show up and say,
Hmm.
"Oh, well, you're not advanced as us." Usually they were in togas or some other kind
Yeah,
of,
sure, of course. That's as one does.
yeah. Anyway, I don't want to get into a wardrobe critique, but for the super beings, but they'd always say like, "Oh, perhaps someday you'll be like
That's
us,
right.
but right
Sure.
now you're not."
Yeah.
And that was always so goddamn hokey.
Yeah, it was hokey.
I always intensely disliked those bits of dialogue. And here it just said, don't have any dialogue
Hmm.
at all. Right. Just
Right.
don't have that moment that's at all relatable. Just let the audience puzzle through what is
Hmm.
happening here. Clearly, there's some sort of transformation that's gone on. We don't know what the ramifications are for humanity when the first star child comes
Hmm.
back to Earth, but we know something significant has happened from an evolutionary perspective.
So I don't remember, and like I said, I thought I read the book. Maybe I didn't, but if I
Hmm.
did, it was 40 years ago plus. Apparently, the Star Child sets off the nuclear bombs on Earth in the end of the novel,
Oh, I didn't know that. I didn't know that.
and that Kubrick decided not to do that because it was too much like the end of Doctor Strangelove.
Thank God. Well,
Which
and I
is,
would say, by the way, thank God that he never showed the aliens because they thought about having
yeah, they
aliens,
did.
and they had, I don't know if they were puppets or whatever. They did some mock-ups of them and they didn't
Hmm.
work. And I think it was so much better to just have the aliens be completely mysterious.
No, I mean that's a huge conundrum to deal with that, and that's totally fair. I guess again, and maybe it's giving something you were going to ask before, but I think this is a good place to bring it up. See, I think that like the end of Close Encounters ends with a lot of questions.
Yes.
But I felt like I came away at least understanding. I had some of my questions answered at the end of the movie.
Hmm.
As to why the people in the movie were behaving the way they were, at least in a general sense. They were drawn to this place and they were being influenced by these other creatures. And that there was a desire to at least commune with these humans, even if we don't know
Hmm.
why and we don't know where they're going. But there was at least some closure. and some explanation. And maybe the answer for this movie is that the aliens wanted to evolve humanity, but it feels. I mean, I'll get real technical. It feels a bit woo-woo in a way that I find unsatisfying. I think that
Okay.
maybe is my core problem. That this movie really, the movie purports to be about humanity, but it's not. It's about the aliens. And we don't know why they're doing what they're doing. That's
Okay.
I think what gets to me at the end of the day, and that the Hal thing is kind of cool, but a side story that could not have, was not relevant to the plot ultimately.
But that didn't bother you with Close Encounters. That's interesting.
But in Close Encounters, I feel like there was at least enough narrative closure to explain what was going on in the movie,
Yeah, but
and I
we did
don't.
we never knew why they were contacting us at
But
that
they knew.
particular moment.
That's true, but they at least we knew they wanted to communicate with us and they wanted
Hmm.
to commune with more humans. We don't know why. And
Right.
as at least one commenter left on, one of the various places we talk about this, she found it frustrating. Maybe the way that I find this frustrating. And that's, I think, also a fair response to that movie. That movie grew in my estimation when I watched it this time. This one, I don't know. I'm still, and the fact that it elicits any kind of response is an indication that it's a good movie. So I'm not going to say it's
Hmm.
not a good movie. I think it's a very good movie, but I find it it's too abstract for my tastes. Perhaps that's the problem, and
Okay.
maybe this is just a taste thing. But mm, I don't know.
Okay.
Now I'm just making noises.
Ugh. Ugh. Boy, that was an old man noise I just made. Okay. Well, so I on the profoundo meter question.
Mhm.
So here's what I'd say. This movie says, look at how far we've come from the creatures that were there at the beginning. What a miracle it was, whether it was natural evolution or the aliens intervening, whatever. That is just amazing how much of a difference there is. Like if we try to get back to your communication point, if we try to communicate with those apes,
All right.
we'd have a hard time.
Sure.
Um, and we can celebrate our technology, but if we're going to look at the progress of humanity on the big scale of things, technology is not the only part of the equation. And, whatever distinguishes us from those apes, we have to stand in awe of whatever it is we're going to become, yeah, in the future. I,
Weirdly,
I kind of think that's pretty profound.
it is profound, but I guess this again. So weirdly, so you go back to the Star Trek examples.
Mhm.
And you're right, the Metrons and the God knows who would say,
The
someday
Organians and
but I do know the Metrons specifically said someday you'll be like us, and some others one did too. But
yeah,
so
I look forward to that day.
that's right.
But until
Um,
then, enjoy your wretched little lives.
but that was an argument of pure evolution, and also an argument of you're going to grow in this direction. I guess
Yeah.
the thing that's getting me, and maybe I'm being too humanocentric here, um, and maybe it doesn't matter. But I feel like this movie is about a grand science experiment by aliens.
Hmm.
And so it I think it to me, just to me, it robs some of the wonder of the evolution because it's not because we worked really hard or because we changed or because we learned to use
Hmm.
tools and we over time became, we went from using bones to kill animals and make war to being able to create spaceships. And oh, look at humanity and its
Hmm.
capacity to grow over the millennia. It's no, you were interfered with by some aliens and that's why you evolved. And that to me, it's less impressive. It's less significant in that sense. And it does put the onus and the focus
Hmm.
on these unknown entities, which is almost religious then and not science, which is weird for a movie that's supposedly hard science. In some ways, it has sort of a religious feel to it that God dipped his finger down and taught us how to do these things. And we finally got to a particular moment in time. And then God took us to the next level when we transcended into the heavens.
Yeah. Oh, I hear you. I hear you.
I told you I was going to be difficult. I apologize.
All right. So let's wrap up a little bit. So this is a big idea movie. As I said at the
Yes.
beginning, like if you wanted to kind of introduce somebody to big idea science fiction, not pew pew science fiction,
No, that's fair. Yeah,
space opera, where
absolutely.
science fiction is a setting, it's not the theme or purpose of the story. are there other than Close Encounters, are there other
Hmm.
movies you would cite as being sort of big idea science fiction? I have some books.
Right.
How about movies?
It, I didn't, I can't really think of good movies that fit this notion, at least ones that I've seen. Right.
Yeah,
I mean, I think like is Interstellar kind of that kind of movie?
nowhere
There
near
are
as
other,
good.
yeah, well, that's just thematically. I wasn't suggesting it was as good.
Yeah, I thought, Arrival, about
Yeah, yeah,
language, we're talking about communication a lot in
yeah.
this episode. Inception,
Hmm.
maybe.
Mm.
Edge of Tomorrow. That was more sort of like a plot device that got
Yeah, I think that's
used
fair.
over and over again. Minority Report, you know, uh,
Mm.
everything everywhere all at once. I think it's hard.
Yeah, it is
This is
hard.
what
Yeah.
makes 2001 kind of stand out is,
No, it's for all of my griping, it's clearly a classic and it clearly does stand out. That's
yeah,
absolutely the case.
yeah. And by the way, just to go back to just a footnote here, Childhood's End was almost like a first draft of this story because that's
Hmm.
about evolution.
Hmm.
Humanity has reached a particular stage, and these very impressive aliens show up,
Right.
the overlords,
Yes.
and the big reveal is that they look like the devil. And
Yes.
but they eventually admit they're at an evolutionary dead end. That the aliens that have kind of sent them to help shepherd human beings in that story,
Hmm.
those aliens are just going to watch us
Right.
zoom off into the future where they're going to be kind of stuck where they are, which is also
Maybe,
kind of sad.
maybe I did read that book.
Yeah.
Um,
All
yeah,
right.
it occurred to me for no good reason. This is a theme that is another science fiction as well. Babylon 5 and the Vorlons and the way the
Yeah.
humans evolve in the far future, like Vorlons and all that kind of stuff. It's an
Hmm.
ongoing theme.
Yeah.
Humans are cool, man.
So, do you think that Star Trek: The Motion Picture was deliberately trying to imitate this movie?
Oh, I don't think there's any doubt in my mind that it was heavily influenced by this film from the beginning, where there's like music before the opening credits to some of the sort of extended flybys and the psychedelic stuff.
Hmm.
I think that without any doubt, 2001 gets kudos for being original in this area, and TMP is imitating. So I don't want to at all diminish that. I did start to feel during some of the Stargate sequence that I was stuck in Proto V'ger.
Yeah.
And so for me, it did drag some. Um, and in some ways, the visual effects in TMP, because they're a decade plus, were more advanced than some of the ones that were in 2001. So, I
Hmm.
mean, but the influence is, I think, undeniable. What do you have a
Oh,
different opinion about that?
absolutely. Absolutely. I think 2001 set a standard for what thoughtful science fiction should be on the screen, and I just think that Star Trek: The Motion Picture was a bad execution of it.
Right.
Almost too close to
No, I
the
think
movie.
that's
Yeah.
fair. I think that's fair. I think, some of the same emotions were evoked watching this as was evoked watching TMP, which I
Hmm.
don't think is the case for you, and that's totally cool. But I did kind of like, all right, enough with the psychedelics. Um, you know, I did. I mean,
Well,
early
there
on,
wasn't
I said,
anything. So here's the difference for me is
okay,
that I had a lot to think about when the psychedelics started.
right.
I didn't really have a lot to think about when the flyover of V'ger started. It's like,
No, the
yeah,
V'ger,
there's an alien. It's something that the crew of the Enterprise didn't expect. But anyway, I wasn't thinking big thoughts at that point in
no,
watching
I think that's
Star
fair.
Trek.
And maybe I wasn't thinking big enough thoughts when we're going through the Stargate because I'm like, okay, are we going to get where we're going anytime soon?
Would I
Um,
enjoy this more if I were stoned?
seems likely, but
Yeah. So I want to say one thing that there is a lot of
sure,
big idea science fiction that could be adapted, and some of
right.
it has been, right? So we have this, being a sort of child of both the short story The Sentinel and Childhood's
Right.
End. Dune was adapted
Right.
multiple times. Others have not. So I put on the list, and these aren't just, kind of big ideas in the sense of cosmically big, but, Ringworld certainly is a cosmically big
Hmm. Hmm.
story about this gigantic structure found in distant space and who built it and why did they build it and so forth. The Left Hand of Darkness, kind of exploring gender and, how, how in some sense we're aliens to each other. That was, I think, a big idea book. Fire on the Deep, if you want another big cosmic story, along with Rendezvous with Rama, we mentioned before. Humanity intercepts a huge alien artifact and tries to figure out what it's there for. The Forever War, Hyperion,
Hmm.
the three body problem was something adapted to TV. So there's a lot of material out there that if
Oh, there
somebody
is.
wanted to make another 2001, I would say don't do what Star Trek the Motion Picture did, which was try to have the same sort of story. So many other different big idea stories are there, ready made to be converted into a script.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I'm
And
just
do
thinking about this
collaborations with
list.
science fiction writers the way
No, that'd be
that
good.
Kubrick did with Clarke.
Agreed.
Okay, let's get to our signature last phase with lots of psychedelic lights of the podcast. The incomprehensible part of the podcast. uh, what merch did you have based on this movie?
So I had, well, I didn't. So my parents had a bunch of LPs, which I think some which they got from the old school LP, like those clubs where they'd send you
Yeah.
records, and they had the soundtrack to 2001. And I was, as a young geek, intrigued by the cover of the album, which showed actually a scene that's not in the movie, which is the Pan Am ship leaving. Instead of docking, it's leaving the space station. It's from the poster. So that's the
Okay.
closest I came was that. How about yourself?
I had a record that featured Arthur C. Clarke reading parts of the book. Uh, I didn't have the poster, though lots of people did have the poster
Hmm.
when I was young. But I read I listened to the Clarke reading of the book. Is there anything that you wish you had?
Yeah, the poster would be pretty cool. I like the poster.
Yeah, I love the poster.
The great
So
poster.
I actually was inspired to buy a magnetic sticker of the HAL interface, which I don't know what I'm going to stick it on. Probably I'm going to
The
stick it on
great
the
burning
car.
eye.
The eye, yes.
See, there's
Uh,
another problem. Don't put those eyes everywhere. That's part of the. See, don't put the Alexa everywhere. That's
yes,
the problem. You got no privacy, man.
right. But this movie does inspire a lot of thought about artificial intelligence, to say the
Oh, it
least.
does. It
Yeah,
does,
it
especially in the
does.
current era. In that
Yeah,
sense, it's
very
interesting.
timely, very timely.
Yes.
And since I'm addicted to ringtones, maybe like a ringtone of the monolith sound, the chorus. Whoa, whoa,
You,
whoa.
you might as well face it. You're addicted to ringtones.
I am. I am. All right. Well, with that frank admission of my frailty, thank you, listeners, for sticking with us through another episode of Ancient Geeks.
Take care.
Time for us to evolve to the next stage of humanity, so we'd best be off. Thanks for listening. On the podcast app or platform of your choice, please like and subscribe, and leave us some feedback in a review or contact us directly at someancientgeeks@gmail.com. Look for us on our Substack, someancientgeek.substack.com, as well as on other social media like Reddit, Facebook, and Blue Sky. All content is copyright 2026, Tom Grant and Stephen Taylor. Music is by Reversed Image, you can find on Pixabay. See you next time.
I know that you and Frank were planning to disconnect me, and I'm afraid that's something I cannot allow to happen.